Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where the topic is streamlining intake and prioritization in a hybrid project management world. My name is Doug Welsby, and I'm the channel manager here at Wickersoft. I'm also joined by my colleague Jim Patterson, our director of sales. During today's webinar, attendees will be on mute and the line will not be open for questions. However, feel free to use the GoToWebinar question feature to submit questions. I will address these questions during the webinar and will respond via email if we do not get to your specific question. And if for some reason you get distracted or pulled away from the webinar, no need to worry, as I'll be emailing a link to the presentation once it has been posted to our YouTube channel. I'll now turn the presentation over to Jim.
Thank you, Doug. Much appreciated, and thank you everybody for spending some time with us today. I'm excited to talk to you about this topic that seems to impact many organizations today and how we can streamline this intake and prioritization process, especially in this hybrid or adaptive project management world that we find ourselves in today. Some of the topics that we're going to cover today. We're going to be capturing project proposals and ideation. And the processes and the rationale behind some of that and some options we have in that regard. The concept of evaluating resource capacity. We need to understand when we make these, what's the demand for resources and how that reflects against our capacities to deliver on those projects or initiatives. The financial planning, what the financial requirements are going to be and how we're going to categorize these things via CapEx and OpEx, et cetera. And then ultimately the prioritization and selection process to make sure that we're working on the right projects and that we spend our money wisely that gets the biggest benefits and returns for our organization. Then ultimately we're going to spend the bulk of our time today in a demonstration of how these concepts can actually be implemented today using existing technologies and solutions that are available. And then we'll come back and have a summary and a wrap up and some special offers for you that attended and registered for the webinar today. So with that, let's get started. So let's just start with kind of a 101 type of definition of what is project intake. Well, ultimately, it's the earliest stage of a project lifecycle. It's when, the idea for it first gets spawned and somebody actually asks for it. It really represents an overall funnel for consideration, evaluation, and selection of projects and other work efforts so that when we decide to work on them, we're not looking at a portfolio of things that are maybe just improbable or highly unlikely things for us to work on, and that we use this funnel to do evaluation and vetting of these projects and potential projects. It also captures all the needed information and justification that's needed to make an informed decision on whether or not to proceed with the project. And then ultimately, it's to define and establish what it will take to accomplish this proposed project, and also establishing the expected benefits or commercial benefit or returns the organization should expect to receive should we embark upon this effort. Ultimately, we're going to incorporate a process for approval and governance so that there's some order to it and the right people are involved to make these informed decisions. Well, part of the reason why we have this session today is how are organizations doing this today? And for a large part of the market out there, people are still doing this in a document-oriented type of process where people are filling out Word documents and Excel spreadsheets or making email requests or using some general collaboration tools like Teams, for example, from Microsoft. The financial piece may be done in a separate, disconnected way in the financial and ERP systems that are in place. But no matter what we do, we still have to incorporate some process and approval and governance around that. And just like the documents themselves, this can become a highly manual process and somewhat cumbersome and unwieldy, especially as we go through the types of processes that have to be navigated in order to go through this process successfully. And then there's other methods but they're still not connected to what can be considered the eventual project portfolio and execution solution, where we would actually manage this potential project should it indeed become a project. So then we end up with a scenario where we have disconnected tools and processes. We end up with silos of information. Oftentimes people are duplicating the same data in different places at different stages of the intake process, which can lead to data loss or even inaccuracy as far as how that information gets transcribed. Having that data separate and disconnected also can lead to unclear and competing priorities with no real visibility into the fact that there are competing priorities. Version control becomes a problem. The processes get inconsistent. And then also the people who are submitting those things or who are working on these submissions on the intake process lack visibility into where these submissions stand in the process. And just getting status or providing status becomes a manual, cumbersome process in and of itself. When we have different sources and different silos, the business cases or use cases are hard to compare and prioritize without a lot of manual effort in compiling these things into maybe a combined spreadsheet or something of that ilk. And then it also slows down the approval process when you make this a manual or, let's just say, less than efficient process. Also, consistent valuation and benefits assessment is sometimes difficult in order to achieve with this type of manual or semi-manual process. So today, we have the means to really provide more consistent and integrated ways to work in the regard to project intake. You know, we can provide a central database repository where all this data is available, such that the data is not locked up in individual documents, which I liken to a data capsule where it's not easily accessible for things like reporting and analysis. It can actually be integrated with what will eventually be your portfolio and project execution solution so that you have a continuum from the intake and the requests or the idea all the way through the execution of that project. We provide online forms-based data capture. The benefit of that being the fact that you can actually now have that data available for reporting, analysis, or use for other parts of the system without duplicating or re-entering that data. And then ultimately, we're going to have all elements that are needed for a full business case potentially made available here online as well, not as a separate artifact in this whole intake process. We can have different templates for different initiative and project types or for different levels of complexity as they might be required. And we can accommodate all stages of the intake funnel depending on the nature of your business and the way that you onboard things. We can capture ideas at that idea stage. We can have formal requests. We can have full-blown business cases. We can capture funding requirements and the approval around those. And then even the transition from this idea or request stage all the way to the execution of a real project can all be handled within the solutions that are available today. Ideally, we want to capture all data elements in one place. And so everything we would need to make an informed decision, full description and characterization of the request. What is it? Why should we do it? How is it categorized? What type of project it is? What business unit? And those types of things. What product line? Those types of things are all things that can be captured in this central place. Also, we want to make sure we're working on the right things that align with the strategies or the missions of the business. So getting strategic alignment information and how well these requests align with our strategy can be evaluated, as well as resource estimates and plans. What will it take from a resource perspective, and do we have the resources or the wherewithal to do this within the time frames proposed? Same thing goes true with financial estimates. Do we have the dollars in our budget to accommodate that? Or if we don't, do the benefits outweigh that? Are there enough projected benefits that can be, let's just say, well substantiated, that we can use that as a basis for, say, let's go ahead and do this or prioritize this ahead of other things? And that's where a common prioritization, scoring, and valuation method becomes important, so that we can look at project candidates objectively and be able to select these based upon their merits rather than personal preference or pet projects. And then having different project types with the proper data elements for the approval process. So not every project type may be the same. So you might have varying project data or request data that you put in for projects depending on what the nature of it is. And then ultimately, solutions today now are available to provide you with automated workflows for both routing of these things at the various stages to the right audiences and for the approvals to get to the next steps all the way to the ultimate decision of approval to proceed with a project or not, and capturing through every stage of the life cycle. Further compounding this is demand comes from many sources. There might be ideas that you bring in from a variety of different sources, and they're very early on at the idea stage, and they could be coming from emails, they could be coming from documents and other sources or even other systems. There's formal requests that might be part of a request process, and there may be a document or a spreadsheet or even just a loosely managed type of email process to get those requests in that somebody would transcribe into some request process. Or even for things like customer-facing projects that you might have out there. You might be tracking opportunities in a CRM system and putting proposals and quotes out there that should the customer sign on the dotted line, that's an intake that might become a project should we get a contract or somebody signs on the dotted line. And then once these requests all go through a funnel for these different types, they may be routed depending on the nature of the work it is. They may be, projects of different types. They might be traditional waterfall facilities, infrastructure projects that we manage in a more traditional way. They could be application related, where software development and more agile approaches are being used to do those things in a more hybrid type of world. And there may be different execution tools being used for that. And then they could be just service requests that ultimately are decided that they are. And these could be requested or changes or problems or tickets or incidents as they go through the funnel, as they're vetted and they decide they're not full-blown projects. But the idea here is that you can have a common funnel for all intake, go through a common governance structure so that it's not disconnected, there's not visibility into competing priorities, and you can really decide on what things we should be working on that are best for the business, that we're working on the right things. It's not good enough that we execute well. If we execute well on the wrong things, we probably haven't executed well as an organization. And then ultimately having reporting across all this through the whole process. Now, on top of that, it may not be a single solution, as I had mentioned before, that has our demand sourcing from. To that end, the ability of having a solution like OnePlan from Microsoft that has out-of-the-box connectors that can actually use data from a variety of systems, but bring it all together into a common repository. At the top, you see that there may be ideation solutions in places right now. They could be using SharePoint lists today or things like AHA. They might be using some IT service management solution like a ServiceNow or a Dynamics or a Salesforce Service Cloud as an input mechanism because people are already putting tickets and requests there. And that might be a funnel that feeds in. And it might not be the only funnel, it might be one of several. On the professional services side, you may have opportunities I had mentioned before that are being worked on for client-facing or customer-facing projects that should we succeed in securing that business, they could become projects. And then integrations with things like financial and ERP systems, as I had mentioned, to get the financial dimension brought in, but not duplicate entry of that information. And ultimately, you can execute these things in agile tools like Jira or Azure DevOps, or the Microsoft tools like Project and Project Online, or even non-Microsoft work execution or work management tools as well. The idea here is that we're not limited on the sources of where this demand comes from, even if our goal is to bring this together into a common intake and governance funnel. To further complicate this, intake processes in many organizations are complex. It's not as simple as let's put in a request and let's approve it or not. It's usually one of many stages. Sometimes these even branch out more than these as far as different options on go, no go, or yes or no decision points. And there's also usually many participants and stakeholders involved. Doing this in a manual process and routing these things manually or convening people into rooms and meetings all the time in order to discuss these is not always the most efficient way to do this. So to be able to model a business process through a workflow engine like Microsoft Power Automate, formerly called Microsoft Flow, gives us the ability to provide more automated routing of this, make it more expeditious, provide visibility to it all, and basically get things successfully through the process as quickly as we possibly can. So in a solution today, the ability to be able to capture ideas, requests, and business cases is paramount. A single location for, at least for some segments of this, for submitting all types of requests, and this can take a number of different forms. I've got examples on the right of things being done in a Power Apps solution, or some things that are being done in different mechanisms within SharePoint, whether it be ideas, requests, or even capital budget requests. The idea is to be able to provide for simple idea capture, maybe more full-blown project requests, or even to the complexity of a full business case. And we can provide these things to you in easy to use, even tabbed forms for different data types, or maybe certain data only becomes available or required to enter at certain stage specific times within that intake process. But this automated workflow, and then at the end of the day, an automated promotion of this request and the data that came with it into a project or a project entity in your solution, is something that saves a lot of rework, duplicate entry, and provides an expedient process for getting things from point A to point B. Another key piece of this is resource capacity planning. The ability to say, what is it going to take for us to do this when people want to ask the question or make a decision on this? Detailed time phase resource estimates, but more top-down planning. Planning from FTE, percentage in hours. And it doesn't necessarily have to be specific individuals. It could be, what resource types do we need? What teams need to be involved? Those types of things may be enough for us to just understand the order of magnitude and the resource commitment that's going to be required by the organization. And this idea, this information can be nurtured and matured from the idea stage all the way through when we execute on this, and keep this information at our fingertips and have it contribute to an overall portfolio. The idea is to look at existing demand and commitments and what we're already committed to as we're planning, to see if we have the ability to do that, or do we have to make some trade-offs. Same thing holds true with financial planning. Do we have the budget or the dollars to do this? Planning these things with flexible cost types and categories, original budgets, maybe revised forecasts, capture the actuals, or even making statements on the overall benefits or revenue we hope to achieve as we're making this request and or business case, and be able to have labor costs and non-labor costs associated with this. It can be part of the original business case and also part of the ongoing project execution through the life cycle of a project. And then all this feeds into an overall prioritization and alignment process where portfolio analysis is fully supported, supporting weighted scoring, ranking, and metrics, even modern type of prioritizations like WSJF, weighted shortest job first for agile teams, and also being able to provide some drag and drop prioritization to supplement that objective ranking or scoring. And that what if analysis provides dynamic visibility and the saving of scenarios by looking at resource impacts, financial impacts, and the timeline and the roadmap that we're going to be proposing to our organization. And all the way through, we have data visualization analysis. One of the benefits of having this in a system rather than in documents and emails is that it's now available to do evaluation and analysis and better decision support for looking at these types of requests and understanding what they are, what their value are, what they're going to cost, and how they're prioritized, so that we can really use it as a decision support system, not just a way to capture the information. So hopefully that sets the stage for you today on some of the concepts we're going to be talking about. And Doug Welsby is going to jump back on here now and give you a demonstration of these things in action using tools that are readily available today.
All right, so let's get started with a quick review of how we can do prioritization within a variety of different solutions. As Jim has said, demand and intake management means we need to manage a growing list of backlogged projects and start focusing on only approving projects that align with strategic goals and resource capacity to avoid portfolio waste. Today, I'll show you how our solutions provide visibility into demand and how we deploy an easy-to-use interface for accepting demand from throughout your organization. So whether you're soliciting ideas from everyone throughout the organization or filtering demand through functional roles such as business relationship managers, deploying a demand and intake solution is an easy first step towards aligning budget and strategy with demand. So first, let's talk about executive review of demand. These executives own the strategy and the budget, the business direction for your organization, and they should have clear insight into where the money is being spent and where their investment dollars are headed. So with this report that we're looking at now, rendered using Power BI, we're able to very quickly expose to our executives a series of project requests or demands that have been submitted within the organization. We see requests by priority, by alignment, the different types of requests, and of course we can then examine these and compare them using cost versus benefits or a prioritization type of bubble. So if an executive was examining this list of demand, they could very quickly go in and use this tool to say, I really only want to see the security type requests and maybe the cloud computing type requests. Maybe that's their area of focus. And let's see what's been deemed or assessed to be critical for the organization. And they're immediately able to filter this list interactively down to see that one project that meets that critical cloud computing type of requirement. They can equally use this sort of report to filter, as I've said earlier, on cost versus benefits by the type of request that's happened. So here we're seeing in this chart that we have estimated cost and estimated benefits aligned by the type of proposal that's been submitted. So we have application development, cloud computing type requests, etc. Way down near the bottom, we see these mobile related submissions that are in our demand queue. And we see here that the estimated costs outline the benefits for those projects. So it gives those executives who are reviewing these intake and demand priorities an opportunity to see and assess that maybe mobile is not an area where we want to focus because the benefits that we've assessed outweigh or outweighed by the costs in that particular type of request. They could, of course, make a decision to override that, and I'll show you how an executive can effectively make some command decisions later on in this demo, but at least this gives them some starting points around information as to what the demand and intake funnel looks like. So many of you already have a basic list, maybe in Excel or in SharePoint, for submitting project demand and requests. So here's just that, a basic list where someone's able to go in and review the state of these requests, new, in review, or approved, see some information in this list about the project type and who requested it, and other details that are easily exposed as we drill down into any one of those requests. So here, if I look at this Sinbel project automation requirement, I see a few details about it, the type of project, who the requested sponsor is, and I start to see some prioritization information. Now, we'll spend quite a bit of time during this demo thinking and talking about prioritization, but here what we've done is we've outlined a couple of basic prioritization type of questions. What's the alignment of this proposed project with your corporate strategy? Is it low, medium, or high? What's the risk of delivering on this project? In this case, it's deemed to be a medium risk type of project. And together with some benefit and cost type information for these new demands, we can start to derive weighted prioritization scores that help us easily make some decisions around which projects make the most business sense, just using some of those basics of alignment to corporate strategy, impact against risk, and other factors that are important for each and every organization. Now, of course, this is fully customizable, and we could take on other approaches as well. So perhaps you're working in a hybrid or an agile world, and you're making decisions based on not strategic alignment, but maybe you're using lean prioritization for making decisions. So here's another sample of how you could do intake for new project submissions or demand. In this case, my support customers using Mobile Idea has some idea prioritization metrics, including WSJF, weighted shortest job first, swag, time criticality, cost of delay, etc. Other important factors used within the lean approach for making determinations as to whether or not a particular project is suitable or appropriate to your particular organization. So this next approach that we'll take a look at is using a Microsoft Power Platform and an Enterprise Project Management Office Power App for capturing project requests. So whether you're using a SharePoint or an Excel list or doing prioritization based on strategic business drivers, or using lean metrics, you'll need to remain flexible and adaptive, and perhaps even mix these approaches together into a hybrid type of delivery or approach for this. So here we see a list of active requests. I can very quickly go through and, as an executive examining this, say I'm only interested, for example, in the mobile new demand that's been submitted into this tool, and view and filter this based on only those types of projects. I could easily overlay other ones by changing that filter that I've applied. And then I could, of course, sort this list as well by saying I want to see the critical submissions first, all the way down to the low in this list. Either way, we've got great control within this type of view as to how you sort, filter, and organize the data that's being exposed as we're taking you through a project demand or an intake type of exercise. So let's take a look at the details of one of those submissions, and in a similar but still different fashion than we would approach with either a SharePoint list or an Excel list, we're able to gather information about this particular project, including the potential name for this new demand, who's requested it, who the executive sponsor might be. We see over on the right, we have some details and a value statement for this particular proposal. But you're starting to see a couple of more aspects to this submission tool that are starting to take into account some of the Microsoft Power Platform capabilities, such as this business process flow we see along the top, where we've designed a new in review and approved type of flow for the capture, review, and subsequent approval or rejection of newly proposed projects that have been submitted into this project request queue. On the business case page, here's where, again, in a similar fashion to what you might be doing today using an Excel spreadsheet or some other disconnected tool, we're able to do prioritization within these views and say, for example, what's the strategic alignment of this project? What's the risk of this project? And then derive a weighted, calculated prioritization score for this newly submitted proposal. Now, within this case, we've got a variety of different types of information we can gather, including financial information for this proposal. But the reality is that this gets you started. This is for intake, initial review, but it doesn't provide you everything that you need to know in order to make decisions about these projects. What we need to do and what we need to gather with regards to information after this is we need to have an understanding, as I click through to the support customers using mobile project, of other details about the actual submission, including those questions that I always get asked. And those are additional questions about financial and potential resource impacts of the potential to deliver this project. So here on this same project, as we've stepped through our workflow, we're now into a position where we can see more extensive information on these general tabs, including details about the state of the project, the priority that we've gathered for it, financial information, etc., summarized in this general tab. But as I switch to the business case here, you'll see that we've requested more comprehensive information in this stage. We took it from an initial project request with some very high-level Q&A to kind of simplify that intake process and get us through that initial stage of, is it a good idea, yes or no, down to now, does this proposal make business sense? So we've got a description, business case, value statement, again, a very flexible interface. We can easily configure this to meet your sorts of business case proposal questions, capturing the documentation and the information that you need for your records and for your decision process easily within this flexible type of interface. In the lower part of the screen, you'll see that we truly are hybrid in this example, mixing standard prioritization business driver type questions. Will it lower cost? Will it, for example, improve employee retention this year, if that's a significant business driver for your organization? And then calculating a prioritization score. Or we've mixed in here lean prioritization with WSGIF, SWAG, etc., just to give you an example of how within a configuration that's been developed for your deployment within your organization, you can mix and match these approaches all within the same type of deployment within the same screens. So what's next after this? As I mentioned earlier, the next question that gets asked is typically, well, how many people is this going to take? What's the impact on my resources? And then subsequent to that, what's the impact on my financials? So while we're looking at a Power Platform delivery of this solution, what we now see is Microsoft's one plan resource planning capability. Within this interface, we're now seeing that I have said, well, I think and I estimate for this project, we're going to need the following resources, including a mix of human and generic resources, project managers together with Grace or Amy. And over the proposed timeline for this project for the upcoming calendar year, here's my estimate as to the volume of those users I think I'll need to deliver this project. I've calculated this using hours, but it could just as easily be percent or FTE. And I've gone to a monthly level of granularity, but maybe you want to roll that up to quarterly or yearly, or maybe take a stab at a 5-year plan for long-running projects. And we have that flexibility within this tool. And then finally, of course, you're seeing an immediate and visible heat map showing us the impact of assigning these particular resources onto this particular project or proposal, and measured against other proposals that are currently in the queue and active plans that are ongoing and being delivered within the system. So these green, amber, red type indicators give us an immediate bit of feedback as to whether or not it's appropriate to maybe assign Amy to this project, or to highlight the fact that we're going to be short on developers. So we've assessed our resource requirements. Let's take a look at the financial impact of this particular project now. And in this case, we've designed, again, an interface using our One Plan planning tool for financial planning that looks very much like a tool that you should all be familiar with. Everyone's using Excel, it seems, to do this off of the side of their desk. So in this integrated fashion, we have One Plan financial plans showing a variety of cost categories, including labor that we've pulled across from that resource plan I just finished building out, showing me materials and supplies, travel and expenses, contracts, etc., and information about the expense types, and then other details that might be important to you as you're gathering the information and the financials for these projects and these proposals that can be added to this type of spreadsheet-like interface through which you can build out, once again, those resource and financial and business case type documentation libraries about these plans that are in this proposal queue as you think about building them. So now we have enough information. We've gathered high-level details about the project. We've gathered some prioritization information, such as impact on our strategy and risk, maybe using lean metrics. We've built out a resource estimate and a financial estimate. So now we can start to do portfolio decision making. At this point, what we're able to do is we're able to switch to a view within our One Plan portfolio views that shows us a selection of projects or plans. Here we're mixing active and proposed projects all in this same view. And we have details exposed in this view about their health, including schedule health indicators, financial health indicators, etc. We have a very flexible interface here through which we are able to add configuration data about these plans and then expose it in a variety of different views. So the first thing I'm able to do within this type of view is say, well, maybe what I want to do is I want to filter this view to only show my proposed projects in this view. So just like I'm able to do within those demand and intake interfaces in a SharePoint list, or even within the Power Platform views, I'm able to very quickly limit my One Plan portfolio plan views to showing only proposed projects in this initial view. So I have this list view that's available to me with different filtering and grouping capabilities. What if I was to switch to a board view? So if I'm an executive in looking at this solution, and that executive saying, okay, we have a number of different plans that have been submitted in that demand queue. We've assessed their priority as critical, high, moderate, or low, again, based on those business drivers and those metrics. And so those executives, they might have what I like to call a Nike moment or a Nike approach where they just do it. They say, we're going to take this project and we're going to deliver it no matter what. So if we look at the prioritization score for this particular plan, it's quite low. It's in the red. It's not up to that at least mid-level 50% score. And yet that executive has said, this project, this particular proposal is important to me. So we're going to do it. We're going to move that over. So we offer manual prioritization and reprioritization within these boards. If I switch back to my list view and examine my entire portfolio of plans that have been submitted, in this prioritization view, I've changed the look and feel in that particular saved view to show those business driver prioritization questions that we asked. Is it aligned with our strategy? Is it going to improve employee retention? What's the risk of that project? And we now have a prioritized list where I can sort them from high to low and very quickly see my highest priority project. Or maybe if I'm someone who's working in finance, I'm interested in examining the most expensive proposals that have been submitted through this interface. Or maybe I want to examine the benefits that are related to those various proposals. So whatever sort of information you're interested in, we can use those details to group, filter, and sort the information within these views. Now, that executive in that board view just simply said, we're going to do this project. He dragged it from one column to the other in that board view. We can do the same thing in these views. And that's a question we often get asked. While the solution might tell us what the highest priority project is, can an executive go in and make some decisions? Well, absolutely they can. As I add a prioritization count down the left of this view, I can then just take this social networking integration project. If it's my baby project and the one that I want to deliver, I just drag it up, drop it earlier in this list, and then do a manual reprioritization with that one, just like it did in that board view where I said, we are going to take this one from just a moderate and make it a critical plan or something that we're planning on delivering. So we've got good flexibility within this tool to offer you that manual type of prioritization of a portfolio. But what about those resource plans and those financial plans that we spent the time building out? How do they come into play? So what I can do within these views is I can add and overlay my resource plans within this same view. So if I'm looking at this entire calendar year, I'm able to very quickly visualize all of my different resource plans that I've built out for those different proposals, sort and view my resources that are assigned across those different plans, and I start to see some indicators here that we're in trouble with some of those resources. So Adam's not too bad. He's a little over allocated. But what about Amy? What's going on with her? And I can drill down in, and I can very quickly see that in this case, Amy is over allocated because she's been assigned to a significant amount of work within the month of March. So I look in the top half of this screen and I see that improve user experience is in a proposed state, has a very low impact on some of these business drivers, and a low prioritization score. So in addition to being able to manually override the decisions that tool's making for you, you can base your decision on resource capacity and demand management for those resources. So I can say here, I'm going to deselect that improve user experience project, and we now see that things are looking a little better for Amy in the month of March and April. Now, there's still a significant impact on her due to a couple of these other projects. Maybe we want to reschedule those, or maybe we want to reassign someone else in to take Amy's place on those projects or split her work between a couple of different resources. And you certainly have that capability within this tool as well. So now let's pivot not on the resource plans, but let's take a look at our financial plans that we've laid out for these proposed projects. So we see in this view not resource information, but financial and budget information that we have estimated for these projects as we put them through that whole project requests and initiation type of approach. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to overlay my FY20 budget information. And you'll see in this line where we have a FY20 target, we have a total budget available to us of 4.9 million. And all of these plans, all totaled up, approach approximately 7.5 million. So here we're able to view this list, view once again a heat map indicator showing us where we're exceeding our budget. For example, in July, we've established a budget of 500,000. We have $922,000 worth of project requests. What's going on? Well, as I scroll down this list, I can see, for example, this Microsoft Teams integration project. In July, it's going to consume almost $250,000. So once again, I can make a decision based on real numbers, not on gut feel, but based on resource plans and financial plans to remove that Microsoft Teams integration delivery. Now we're getting a little closer to budget in July. Obviously, we still have some work to do, and I could remove some of these other plans to get ourselves back on budget. But of course, there's other approaches as well. Things such as our ability to reschedule some of those projects, maybe to move some budget around. We got 400,000 and 500,000 allocated here. Maybe we push some of that budget out. So there's ways to approach this and ways that we can use all of the information at our disposal to make sensible decisions about the portfolio that we deliver on. And then finally, once we've gotten this looking a little better financial shape on this timeline, we're then able to save those scenarios out. So in this case, I save this scenario as my FY 2020 scenario 1. And if I open that up again, subsequent to this exercise that I've gone through, I'll be able to expose that information to others in the organization who are interested in seeing some of those decisions I made and how that assessment aligns with our available budget. So once again, we've got this comprehensive portfolio planning and prioritization process that's available to us that allows you flexibility in the demand management and throughout the life cycle of these projects to use a variety of tools and approaches for prioritization. Now, the next step after we've gone through and built out financial plans and resource plans, what is it? Well, that project's been approved. Let's get on to delivery. So it's outside of the scope of today's webinar, and I'll turn things back over to Jim, but we remain flexible with our one plan strategic prioritization and execution tool set. Here I have a plan, this social networking integration program that I've taken through a financial, resource, and business case assessment. We've made a decision to deliver this. I can work out a intermediate plan with some high-level phases directly within our one plan scheduling tool, or just like we do with our approaches for prioritization, we offer you flexibility in your connections through to the execution tool of choice. So when it comes to execution and delivery, just like you have with demand and intake prioritization, you have the flexibility to adopt and implement the delivery tools that your teams are most comfortable with. So I can connect this through to either a project for the web, Office 365 planner, or even a project professional comprehensive project plan that's being delivered within the framework of our Power Platform One Plan Power App. So now to wrap up our webinar, I'll turn things back over to Jim. Jim?
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate the great and thorough demonstration of these capabilities. Let me grab the screen back. And can you see my screen?
I can.
All right, terrific. Let's summarize and wrap this up. The things we talked about today is that demand can come from all parts of the organization, both internal and external. That email, documents, and spreadsheets are how many are capturing requests and ideas today, which is less than ideal. And then disconnected documents and tools result in data silos for all projects and other work intake that makes our jobs more difficult in this realm. Now, one plan we've shown you provides a pre-configured adaptive PPM solution for the Microsoft Cloud. The reason I say Microsoft Cloud is we've shown it in SharePoint types of realms. We've shown it in the Power Apps platform. It can also be rendered in Microsoft Teams if you want to do that as well. But consistent method for intake and governance can be used for all projects if you take on some of the approaches that we showed here today. And then automated workflows will actually automate complex processes that involve many participants and many stakeholders that have to be involved. It can also support a variety of execution methodologies and tools. So the singular intake is not dependent on what execution tool is going to be used. Doug showed at the end how we could do things with Planner, Project for the Web, or Microsoft Project Professional. But depending on your configuration, we can also leverage things like Jira or Azure DevOps or Agile tools that people might be using in those things as well. So it goes beyond just the example that Doug showed today. If we end up with a central repository for intake, it can provide for analysis and reporting for all types of demand, which Doug showed very nicely at the outset, that we can do some slicing and analysis of that information rather than just looking at a list or a form of data and then try to make those assessments ourselves without that context. And also, intake requests can be promoted to live projects with automation, meaning we're not duplicating or transcribing that information into a project or portfolio management execution system after we decide to do that. It makes it for a nice, smooth continuum all the way through the idea stage, all the way through the completion of a project. Now, we do this on a daily basis. We have a particular focus Microsoft does in project and portfolio management among our many gold certifications in the Microsoft Cloud. We were actually founded as a joint venture with Microsoft in 2002, so we're not only a technology partner, we're a business partner. And we were actually named their 2019 Worldwide Partner of the Year for PPM in 2019. As you can see, we have a worldwide footprint with our own offices as well as strategic partnerships in other areas of the world as well. So we can support you on a multinational basis if need be. And we're here to support you to whatever degree you want. We have some folks that actually have us just stand up solutions for them and give them some training and have at it. But we also provide education and training, ongoing support, and even advisory services for people that are trying to mature and improve their processes and standing up PMOs and getting better at these processes and putting best practices in place. So we're here as a one-stop shop to help you in this portfolio management transformation. Now, as a special offer for you that have attended and registered today, we can provide you with a free PPM roadmap workshop to help you understand what it might take to put some of these things in place in your organization. We can review your current use of PPM tools and how you're doing things like intake and demand today. We can assess your current requirements and the desired future state you'd like, and then we can determine how to implement or migrate into this new adaptive PPM world. And we can also give you an idea what an implementation roadmap might look like for best adoption success and what it might cost you to do that over time. So we're happy to do that and do that type of discovery with you on a no charge basis. We also are getting more trial types of opportunities for customers up on Microsoft AppSource and also in the Visual Studio Marketplace for that matter. But if you want to trial these things, you can look for us up on appsource.com. And rather than have you self-serve on that, we can support you on that and help chaperone you through a successful trial operation with that as well. So be aware that you can get hands-on with some of this stuff if you like. So from a next steps perspective, please take advantage of the PPM roadmap offer if you're at that stage where you're seriously considering what to make a move. Take us up on the trial with Microsoft support if you like, if you're serious about making something happen. But if you're not quite there yet, We gave you some generalized demonstration today. We're happy to offer you a personalized one-on-one demo for your organization, tailored more to your requirements and your vision and where you're at just from a PPM and intake perspective. So just let us know and we'll schedule that. You can actually reach us at contactus@wickersoft.com. I'm happy to field any questions for you as well. If you reach out to me, Jim Patterson at jpatterson@wickersoft.com. And if you found this helpful or informative, we have a whole library of on-demand pre-recorded webinars at uswickersoft.com/webinars. It also will have our list of upcoming webinars. We have a new batch coming up shortly to register for. This was the last of our current set of webinars, and we're going to have over the next week or so another roster of those up for you to take advantage of. So with that, I'd like to thank you all again for your time today. And let us know how we can help you. We'd love to engage with you. Have a great day.